Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a compilation of several different patriotic DIY craft items. They are pulled from some different videos from the past, so nothing you've seen this year, but just remember that because you might hear me say our first DIY or our last DIY or things like that multiple times throughout the video. But I hope that you enjoy this collection of DIYs. They're some of my favorites. Let's get started. For this first one, I'm using this sign. This is from the Dollar Tree from Christmas, but I think I picked it up at the end of the season when it was 50 cents. I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong. But they sell these different shape signs all the time for different seasons and holidays. And I'm just scraping off the wonderful. I wasn't worried about saving that because I didn't really think I'd have another use for it. Pulling up any chunks of hot glue, it really came off pretty easily. And then I'm going to sand it down just to smooth it out. You could certainly use the back of the sign, but this is pretty easy to make over, and then I didn't have to worry about covering it. So I'm just giving this a coat of a Waverly chalk paint in the color white. I might have done a couple coats. I really didn't need a full coverage because we're actually going to be covering it, but I didn't want any of the words and stuff to peek through. We're going to cover it with some fabric. I'm also going along the edges just because I figured some white would get on it anyway. So I figured I would just make it, I don't know, look more finished. And then we're going to put a thick coat of Mod Podge on to our sign. We are going to make sure we get all of the edges, and I kept getting some chunks of Mod Podge, I think because I was pouring it out, and so some little chunks had fallen in the bottom or whatever, but that's okay. I also feel like the sponge brush left some little flecks, but it didn't really matter at that part because we're going to cover it up. This is some red and white checkered fabric that I had picked up from the Dollar Tree, I don't know, last year, year before, and I'm just using my iron. I forgot at first that you're supposed to use parchment paper, so I went and got that. I'm just using my iron on with no steam in it, and this kind of reactivates the Mod Podge, and you get a really nice, a really smooth adherence. So I flipped it over to trim it, and I was like, oh my gosh, how did I not make sure that this was straight? So I'm like trying to figure out what to do. Anyways, the Mod Podge does stick really well, but I was able to fairly easily pull it off. First I tried just pulling off part of it, and then I was like, nah, forget it. We're just going to pull it all off, reline it. I didn't have to add more Mod Podge. I just straightened it up and reactivated it with the iron once again. So I left that in there just to point out that obviously you should pay attention to that. So that worked out great. Then once it was all done, we're going to trim it. I'm trying to use this rotary blade from Dollar Tree. It works pretty good. It didn't work super great for this project. So I kind of went back and forth between that and a little cutting tool. But you want to basically trim off this. We're not going to get all of the details yet. We're just going to kind of trim off the edges. And then we're going to put a nice thick coat. I think this is where I keep finding the chunks. It was on this part here. But we're going to put a nice thick coat of Mod Podge on top. Once again, make sure you get the edges really, really good. Maybe I just need a new sponge brush. This kept leaving little flakes behind, so I was like picking that off. So anyways, you can see there's a little spot where the fabric was pulled and it's not totally straight, but you won't be able to tell. If you are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Leanne. I enjoy sharing budget-friendly DIYs here on this channel. Typically, we're doing home decor and very much so on a budget, a lot of Dollar Tree items or like Hobby Lobby or Dollar General clearance. And so I hope that you consider subscribing and sticking around. If you are subscribed, make sure your notification bell is turned on so you don't miss out on my future videos. Now, once that Mod Podge was all dry, the fabric is super hard, and so it's easy to cut away. So I'm going in with this little tool. This is one from the Dollar Tree in the Crafter's Square. It's got different blades. I also tried using like a sandpaper to sand off the edges, thinking that that would work. It did work okay, but I liked the cutting tool better for this particular project, and we're just going to trim up all of the edges. Let me know, do you decorate with any patriotic decor? And if you do, when do you start doing that? Do you wait for the 4th of July? I tend to put mine out for Memorial Day, and I just like to leave it out for the summer. So I'm using a little sharp tool to poke through where the holes were, or you can leave it if you are not going to be hanging it back up and just use it as like a leaning sign. I have this God Bless America sign. I picked this up at a Hobby Lobby last year on clearance. I think I paid like 40 cents for it, but I'm sure you can pick something like this or exactly this up right now if you wanted. And I'm just filling in the little holes with some lightweight spackling from Dollar Tree. Once it dries, we're going to smooth it out, and then we're going to paint this. I'm going to be using Waverly chalk paint in the color Ocean, and I'm just trying not to get the edges, so I'm going to use a smaller paintbrush, but I just really do one good coat. I don't mind if a little bit of the wood comes through. I like kind of the rustic appearance. There's a couple spots on, you can kind of tell here on the R in America that the, I don't know, the surface was kind of bubbling up. Excuse me. But I don't think it's super noticeable in the end. So just pointing that out. I don't think that's why it was on clearance, though. I think it was just end of season. I love picking stuff up at the end of season, saving it for the next year, or repurposing it for something else. Anyways, we're going to paint this whole thing in the color Ocean. And I wasn't sure with this sign if I wanted to add more, if I wanted to add trim, embellishments, if I wanted to add, I don't know. I just wasn't really sure. A bow, but I decided to keep it simple. So I put the hanger back in, and actually, yeah, I think that was the same hanger I pulled off. And then I'm using this wood Gorilla Glue to attach this, and I'm just going to put it on as much of it as possible. I smooth out some of the spots with my fingers so that I didn't have a lot of stuff oozing out the sides. We're going to flip that over and put some bottles of paint on it to weight it down and let that dry. And that's all I did for this one. I'll show it to you at the end. For this next DIY, this little sign was another clearance find from Hobby Lobby last year, but you can use any sort of sign for this. I'm going to tape off the edge because I'm going to keep the blue with white stars because I just think that's really nice. This sign was not in horrible shape, but it was kind of scuffed up, but I also bought it for the purpose of DIYing it anyway. I'm going to sand down the front a little bit just so that I can cover up that writing a little bit easier, and I'm going to give it a couple of coats of Waverly chalk paint in the color white so we have just a nice base to work with. I've got these window clings. I love working with window clings. These are from the Dollar Tree, and I was just trying to find one that I liked and that I thought would fit on the sign, and that one didn't work. So picked out some that I wanted to work with. It took a little bit of maneuvering to figure out how to place it, and I'm showing you here. You can see the background of the window cling has a little bit of like a gray, it looks like almost like a wood grain or something. To make that blend in a little bit more, I'm taking some gray paint, very, very, very little of it, and I'm just dry brushing that across, making little streaks, and that's going to help match the background of the window cling and make it blend in a little bit more. And then I'm trimming mine down a little bit because I was having a hard time making this all fit on the sign. You don't always have to do that, but I was doing that. And we're just going to trim that up. I love these little tiny precision scissors. They are from the Dollar Tree, and they do come in very handy. And I'm going to use some Mod Podge and just put a nice thin coat down and place this on top. You can wiggle it around a little bit, move it around, and smoothing it out, getting out any air bubbles. And then this little flag, the only way to make it fit, I had to cut off one of the flags and trim it down a little bit. But I love how this worked out. Once again, with a little bit of Mod Podge, we're going to smooth that out. I'm going to let that dry a little bit so that it won't move around, because right now it does move around pretty easily. And once there's a little bit more tackiness, I'm going to cover it with some Mod Podge. And that's it. All right, here's another Hobby Lobby clearance item from last year, but Dollar Tree sells a variety of chargers as well. And I'm just using a window cling on it. That's all I'm doing. Now it doesn't stick on its own, so I'm going to use some Mod Podge, but I'm really glad I picked up this little metal charger with a cute cutout of the stars on the outside. Now, I didn't want to put Mod Podge except for underneath this because I didn't want to change the texture of the metal plate charger thing. So I'm just putting Mod Podge on the back of the window cling, just making sure to get all of the edges. And you do still have a little bit of wiggle room here to move it around. I smooth out all of the little bumps. I do not go back over this with Mod Podge. I feel like it was okay, and like I said, I didn't want to change up the finished look of anything. So that's all I did for this one. Just put a window cling on it, and I love it. So for this next one, this is a little spring DIY that I'm just going to take apart and use that pot. But it's a terracotta pot that was kind of roughly dry brushed with some white paint. And I put a piece of tape over the hole. I probably didn't need to, but I wasn't sure how this was going to go down at first. And I just elevated it with a little paint bottle and put a paper towel down underneath along with a little plastic mat. And I'm just squeezing out the paint and letting it drip down. And I like how this came out. I'm going to speed it up here for you. The key for me was to try not to let it drip wherever, like you could see that little drip came down, but it was right in line where it was going to be covered up anyway. Making sure to put enough that it would drip all the way down, but not wanting to waste the paint. And I just kept going. At first I did a little bit too symmetrical, and I was like, oh, I don't want it like every other. So I switched it up a little bit, but I let this dry fully. I let it dry overnight. I didn't speed it up with my heat gun or anything. I let it just, all the drips fall off like they needed to. I just felt like it would be better that way, and it was. I did end up covering this with Mod Podge as well once it was dry, just to seal it in so that it wouldn't chip off at all. But this is a fun little look. I like a little bit more like whimsical and bright and fun for like holidays and seasonal stuff, whereas my everyday stuff is a little bit more simple, like farmhouse, you know, a lot of black and white, natural elements kind of thing. So I had fun with my seasonal stuff, just making it a little bit more playful, I guess you could say. And this is how they all came out. This is the sign. The lighting actually looks a little bit darker in this, but I really like how this came out. It was super simple, but I love the red and white fabric. It's very summery to me, plus the 4th of July pattern as well. With a little pot, I filled that with a succulent. I chose this one out of the other ones I had because it kind of reminded me of a firework. Filled it in with some white stones, and then the little sign and the plate. I will use these throughout my home. Sorry, the reflection on the plate, I could only do so much for that. So I'm using these wood star pieces. These are from Hobby Lobby. I had some left over from last year. When I picked them up last year, I think I got them when they were 50% off. Their regular price is just $1.99 though, and I did have to pick up another pack this year because I didn't have quite enough left over from last year's, and they weren't on sale when I picked them up this year, but still a pretty good price. So they have 3 different sizes. I'm going to use the 2 largest sizes, and I'm going to just do a makeover on the wreath that was already on my front door. That is, I think, what is called a grapevine wreath, I think. I could be wrong. I picked that up from Hobby Lobby. They're not very expensive, just a few dollars, and I just am changing it out. So right now I'm just I didn't bring my wreath in. I will share that with you in a moment. I had a very funny encounter when involving my wreath. But anyways, I was just mapping them out to kind of see how many I needed, the size of them. And then here, I was just kind of dividing them up in front of their colors, like the container colors, because I wanted to make sure I painted the right number of each. And how it turned out was I did 2 small and 2 big of each color. So depending on your wreath, that may end up working out differently, but I alternated the sizes and the color. And I might have been able to figure this out differently, but that's how I did it. So I figured it out. Yay. All right. So we're going to use Crimson, Ocean, and White from Waverly chalk paint, but you can use, of course, whatever you want. You could do a brighter colors if you wanted. You could do it totally different. You could stain them. But I'm going to give them just 1 good coat. I'm going to do the edges, and I'm going to do the front and the back because my wreath can be seen from the inside of my house because it's a glass front. And so I wanted the back to look finished as well. So I'm going to just give them a nice coat on both sides. If you are new here, I would love it if you would consider subscribing before you leave. Don't forget to hit the notification bell that will pop up after you hit the subscribe button as well. And I would love it if you were a part of my little YouTube family. I am going to coat these with some Mod Podge. I just wanted to give them hopefully a little bit of help to, withstand the weathering. My porch gets a lot of sun. Parts of my porch will get wet when it rains because the rain just seems to come down sideways. So I figured a little bit of Mod Podge would hopefully help them stay in good shape a little bit longer. So I'm just going to give them all a nice, good coat of the Mod Podge. So I had a fun little encounter when I went to take my wreath off of my front door to bring it inside to change it up. And I happened to be Marco Poloing a friend of mine here on YouTube, Kendra from Late Night Creations. Anyway, since I happened to capture it, I thought it'd be funny to show it to you. So here I am when I discover a little surprise. So this little, I don't know if it's a gecko or what, was on my door at the time, and I kind of freaked out. So I put it back on my door. I went outside a different door, hung it back, the wreath back up on my door because I was freaked out that something else may have been in my wreath. And lo and behold, later that day, that little lizard was literally inside my wreath. So I was like, forget that. I am not bringing this wreath in my house. I had my husband take it off, shake it out, and just put it on the front stoop. So here I am just working on it outside. I didn't need hot glue or anything. So I just pulled off that little hello sign, which was from the Dollar Tree. I did that in another video. And I laid out my stars. I left the little berry garland that was already on there because there was really no need to take it off, and wrapped the twine around, as you can see, and tied it on itself. And I really love how this came out. And thankfully that lizard did not make it inside my house. That was terrifying. I picked up this doormat. You can't even see the whole thing in the camera shot. This is from Walmart. I think it was like $5. And IKEA has them as well. I bought them in the past from there, but it's not super convenient for me. And I'm using a stencil from Hobby Lobby. You could make one on your Cricut as well, or find them somewhere else. And I'm just stenciling on more with that red, white, and blue paint. And you just kind of have to go pretty thick, but adjust up and down so you don't bleed. But it does take a lot of paint just because of the texture of the mat. I usually use a little black one from Dollar Tree, which works, and I've done a lot of them that way. But I didn't want the black background for this particular one, so I got this mat from Walmart. So I'm gonna do the stars all over the place in the different colors in a couple different sizes. Now I usually put some words on my doormat because we don't wear shoes in our house. And I find it helpful to have like a cute little saying on the doormat. A lot of times people see it and I don't even have to mention to them and ask them to take off their shoes. They just see it and know to take their shoes off when they come inside. I don't love this one. I just put no shoes, which I don't know, maybe it sounds not cute and not, maybe a little harsh, but I didn't have time to go get more stencils. And some of the stencils I've used previously were worn out because I've used them multiple times. So for the stencils I had, which these ones are really good, they're from Hobby Lobby. This is what I could fit. I kind of wish I put shoes off. Not that that necessarily sounds nicer, but it kind of sounds a little bit more funny or snarky to me. But nonetheless, there's lots of cute phrases you can put if you want to put something like this on your doormat. You can put, my last one had cute shoes, now take them off. I've put lose your shoes. You could say please remove your shoes, but I put no shoes. It's not my most favorite saying I put on them, but it worked. But you can also just put stars all over the place. So I did lots of stars, like I said, red, white, and blue in different sizes all over the place. If you are enjoying this video, I would appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out so much, and it's a very easy thing to do. So just hit that thumbs up button, helps YouTube know that you're enjoying my video and makes them more likely to share it with others. Here is my finished doormat. I did layer it over a red and white larger mat, but I love how this came out, and the paint lasts really well for me. I've never had any problem with it, even though it's not outdoor paint. So give it a try. This first DIY we are going to start with is using a wood hanging decor piece from the Crafter Square at Dollar Tree. This is not in the seasonal Patriotic 4th of July section, it's just in their everyday stuff. But I did pick it up with this in mind. We're going to take the hanging twine off and use some lightweight spackling to fill in the hole. Now this is a pretty thick solid piece, so I'm going to put kind of push that spackling in on both sides just to make it easier to fill it all the way through. And then you just want to let that dry and then sand it down to smooth it out, and you'll never know that there was a hole there to begin with. I don't know what else I would use this piece for. But if you have any ideas, give leave them down in the comments. If you would leave the hanging piece on and where you would hang it. Anyways, we're going to give this a coat of a white paint. We're using white Waverly chalk paint. I'm going to do the edges and then one side with the white paint, I think. No. Yes, that's what I'm doing. We're going to do the sides and then one of the large sides. Sides, front. We're going to do the front. We'll call it the front and the sides with the white paint. The edges on these pieces are kind of rough, but you can sand them down if you want. I will sand them down a little bit afterwards, but I do one coat, I think, on the edge and then maybe two on the front here. I just use my heat gun to speed up the drying process, or you can use a hairdryer. I used that for a long time until my hairdryer quit on me. Once that's dry, we are going to tape off some stripes. Now I'm using, I don't know what it's called from Dollar Tree, but it's pretty much washi tape, and I'm using two of them. My head keeps popping in and making it out of focus. 2 pieces worth for each stripe. So you can kind of see I'm using it to measure it, making more stripes, and then we're going to paint this. I like to use the Crimson in Waverly for my red, and we're going to give this 2 coats of paint. I'm trying to be careful and not get paint on the edges or have any bleed through. You'll see I end up with a little bit really where the 2 pieces of tape meet. More so, it wasn't butted up quite enough, but we make it all blend in. You'll never even know. And then the other side of this, I'm going to just paint that in the solid red. And once again, I did 2 coats of that just to get the coverage that I wanted. You can, of course, do different color choices and patterns and colors and paints. I think I said colors twice, but you can use whatever you want. Now, before the paint is fully dry, I'm going to pull off the washi tape, and you can see there in that top one, there's a little thin line. I don't think I had them quite close enough together, so I tried going over it with some white paint, and I think eventually that would have worked, but it would have taken a couple coats because the red is pretty powerful. So then I decided, well, I wanted to distress this anyway, so I tried to sand that down. I did sand down the edges anywhere where the red came over, and that took care of that. And I tried to sand down the white stripes where the red was, like where the little bit of thin red came through, and it helped, but it didn't totally hide it, but it's okay because I wasn't done in my distressing process. So we're going to wipe off all of the dust and stuff from sanding it, and then I'm going to use Antique Wax by Waverly and just try to do a dry brush across that. And I really love I love a lot of stuff old looking and rustic, but I love the Patriotic stuff. It just looks more, I don't know, a little more vintage and whatever. So we put that on the edges and the front. And then I have these gold rub-on transfers from the Dollar Tree. Now, gold may not feel super rustic to you, but we're going to make it blend in and work. These ones actually transferred pretty easily. I've used other, like the gold letters for rub-on transfers from Dollar Tree, do not transfer easily, but this actually went on pretty good. So I will show you one little thing though that you don't want to do that I do. So I'm just using the back end of a tool to scrape this on. You could really almost use your finger for these ones. This one transferred super easily. And I love this little transfer sheet because there's lots of fun little patriotic things on it. So normally when you pull off your transfer sheet, you take the top and burnish it in. And as you can see, it took off some of the lettering. I was like, seriously? Anyways, I added on a firework as well because I wanted to fill that out a little bit more. And normally the burnishing with the top sheet does not take it off, but this gold is a totally different material. But like I said, we're going for some rustic here. So I'm going to go over this with the Antique Wax. Again, I wanted to kind of dull down the gold a little bit. I didn't want it to be quite as shiny. So we are just going to go over the whole thing here and also kind of help seal it in a little bit. And then, I know it looks like we're on to another project, but we're working on the other side of that big star. And I have these little wood star pieces. They're from Hobby Lobby. I got them in a pack. And I painted it with Ocean by Waverly. And then I went in with some Antique Wax and I brushed that on and wiped it off. And it just kind of made it look like a much more dulled down blue. and then we're going to just hot glue that to the striped side. So I wanted this to kind of be, you know, two-sided, no matter where you see it, if you use this on a tiered tray or whatever. So I got that in place. I'm just using my little tool to scrape out some hot glue that had leaked before it was fully dry, and you clean it up and you couldn't even tell. And I love how this one came out. It's simple, and love that rub-on transfer. And because I rusticated it up, that's not a word, I made it rustic, it really doesn't matter that some of the letters came off the transfer. Okay, moving on. One of those wood pellets from the Dollar Tree and some antique wax and a baby wipe. We're going to wipe this on, wipe it off. I did go in with a small paintbrush to try to get all of the little places as well, and I shoved the baby wipe down in the different grooves as well. I just wanted to get all of the surfaces covered in the antique wax so that it was fully covered. You want it all covered so that it's fully covered. Okay. If you are enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up. That helps me out so much. It lets YouTube know that you're enjoying it and makes them think, maybe someone else will like it too. So yeah, give this video a thumbs up. And now I'm going in with some little stencils. These are from the Dollar Tree. They're not amazing, but they worked really good. They are reusable, but they're a little bit fragile, and I have ripped one before. But I just put July on the side here, or it looks like I'm doing it on the front. It's actually going to be the side. And I'm using a small little paintbrush to stencil this on. And these are a self-adhesive stencil. So yeah, I would like to show you different ways to do things because I don't have a Cricut myself, and I know a lot of you don't. So you can still do things even if you don't have the fancy tools. I'm just wiping them off right away with a baby wipe and then putting them back on their sheet, and I can reuse them again in the future. So I just put down July, and then for the other part, I'm using these. They're like a paper cardboard stencil from Walmart. They have letters and numbers. I've used them many, many times. They are cardboard, but they are reusable. Just be gentle with them because they obviously can get more easily torn once they're wet. But I taped that down, and we're putting a 4 on. Now, I will say, this was my plan, my intention. I knew that it would be over the slats, but I kind of wish I'd moved the 4 over just a little bit. But overall, I really like this, and it's kind of just a simple fill-in piece for a tier tray. For this next one, I have this block sign. This was from Hobby Lobby. I picked it up on clearance for 29 cents. I love doing that because I'm just going to make it over anyway. So it was a little bit dinged up and obviously out of season. I'm using my heat gun to help get those stickers off. This made them come off super easy. I did try them prior to that, and it felt like it was going to leave residue. So the heat gun worked well, scraping off all of our stickers. And then I thought maybe this heart was glued on, so I was heating it up to try to get it off. And this was made a little bit better and actually had like 2 little nails in there. But I was able to pop it off, and you can see there's a little, well, maybe you can't see, but there's little nails in there. So I'm just using some, well, those are wire cutters, not pliers, but pulling out the nails. And we're going to sand this whole thing down, smooth out the rough edges. You can see it's kind of dinged up, and I just wanted to kind of smooth it down. And I wiped it off with a baby wipe, and then I did use my heat gun to dry it because I didn't want to wait for it to dry, and since I used the baby wipe, it was wet. Anyway, then we're going to give this baby a couple coats of Waverly chalk paint in the color white. I'm going to do all of the edges and the front and back, and it did take a couple of coats to fully cover up the pink. Maybe not if I had done a thicker coat, but I feel like I always get nervous doing thicker coats that it's going to be like gloppy on the edges and stuff. Is gloppy an actual word? I don't know. But we're going to give this a couple of coats, and once again, I will use my heat gun to help dry it in between, just to speed up the process, but of course, you don't have to do that. If you are new here, I would love it if you would consider subscribing. You just, hit the subscribe button, make sure you turn on the notification bell, that'll pop up after you subscribe, and that makes sure that you get notified every time I post a new video. I enjoy sharing easy, budget-friendly DIYs here on my channel. I do a lot of Dollar Tree items, but most importantly, I do a lot of budget-friendly DIYs. Okay, so we're going to go in with this gray. I just picked a light gray out of my paint supplies, and I will show you why we're doing a dry brush of that across here just to give some light streaks. And this is going to help our next step blend in. I've shown you guys plenty of DIYs using window clings, and we're doing that again today. I love using window clings in DIYs, but sometimes they kind of stand out a little bit. You can see the background here had this like gray paneling, and if you look really carefully, you could kind of see it on that clear edge as well. And so by making the background similar, it's going to make it blend in more and not just look like I stuck a sticker more or less on here. So it's a window cling, not a sticker, and because this is a piece of wood, it wasn't going to stick on its own. So I'm placing a thin layer of Mod Podge on here, and you have a moment to move it around because it is wet, and then I just kind of smooth it out, get out any air bubbles. We're going to go ahead and do the other side. I don't set it down because it wasn't fully dry, but before I did my top coat, I wanted to let it set a little bit. As it sets, it gets sticky, and then the piece won't keep moving around. Initially, if you do the bottom coat of Mod Podge and the top coat right afterwards, it might still move around because it's still wet. And then I'm just going to do a top coat on both sides, and I will also do this around all of the edges just so everything kind of has a similar finish. I am using the matte finished Mod Podge just because that's what I have and that's what I generally prefer, but there's lots of different types of Mod Podge. If you are not aware of that, check them out. I mean, there's dishwasher safe ones and there's all the things. So once again, another simple little piece to put on my tiered tray. I like the double-sided aspect of it, and a cute little graphic using a window cling. No Cricut or Chocolate Tour needed. Not that there's anything wrong with those things, I just don't have them. So for this next one, I have this wood piece from Dollar Tree. Once again, edges are kind of rough. You can sand it down if you want. We're going to sand it down after we paint it. We're going to use Waverly Chalk paint in white, and we're going to paint the edges. We're going to paint the front and the back, and I do 2 coats of white. I didn't want all that wood grain coming through, but you know, you guys can do however you want, depending on the look you want. Once that is dry, what are we doing here? I can't remember. Oh, we're going to use our heat gun. All right. Hopefully the sound is okay with me being outside and the birds and the fan and all that, but I was just sitting out here editing and didn't feel like going inside because it's so gorgeous. Okay, once the paint is on and dry, we're going to smooth out the edges because we are going to put something around the edges, and then I just kind of sanded roughly over the whole thing to just, I didn't mind if there was some little nicks and whatever. I just wanted to rough it up a little bit. So this is more of that, what I call washi tape from Dollar Tree. And I was going to just use stencils around the outside, but then I saw this blue tape with the stars and I was like, this is cute. So if you don't have this, you could just use like a star stencil, which is what I was going to do. But we are just going to take this and wrap it around, and it's a tape. It sticks just fine. And I'm going to do 2 stripes of it. I'm going to do one on the top, one on the bottom, and I just was trying to keep it even. I didn't do it right up against the edge, so I was just trying to make sure it was even. It tears really easily. I trimmed it up just to have a nice, neat little spot where it meets, and you can't even hardly tell where the tape starts and stops. So, like I said, yeah, we're going to do that all the way around. But you could also do like a scrapbook paper or tissue paper around the edge. That would be really cute as well. Or you could just paint the edge a different color. We're making a tiny riser. I don't think I told you that. So now we're going to go, once again, antique wax, make it a little rustic, and I wanted to do that on the top. I'm doing the top, the bottom, and the edges. Sorry, that's not totally in frame, but I didn't want the blue to be so bright. So now I have this little pedestal. This is from Hobby Lobby. I picked this up on clearance last year for maybe 20 cents, something like that. I bought a few of them. It was a little chipped, no big deal. I wanted to dull down the shininess and glossiness of it, so I used some antique wax. I wasn't sure how well that would work and if it would like just rub off. So I let that dry for a little bit, and then I went in with some Mod Podge just to seal that in. And the Mod Podge also with the matte finish will help tone down the glossiness. I left the top as is because you won't be seeing it, and I didn't want it to get in the way of the glue. Now I'm just using hot glue, but feel free to use a stronger glue as well, like some E6000 or super glue gel, but I was just going for quick. So this little lantern also is from Hobby Lobby, last year clearance. I really think I got it for under $1, and I wasn't sure what to do with it. So I was going to try to see, this is to hold a tea light, and at first I thought maybe I can pry this off, but you know, I have to remember when I'm DIYing or making over Hobby Lobby items, they don't typically come apart as easily as Dollar Tree items because they're made a little bit better. So I use my heat gun, which you got to be careful doing on metal, thinking I could loosen up some glue or adhesive. In the end, I was like, all right, forget it. We're leaving it in there. This is some vase filler from Hobby Lobby that I picked up last year, so I got it super cheap. And a couple more of those wood stars that I had painted on both sides. And we're just going to, which by the way, those stars literally just fit in there. I should have checked that before I painted them, but thankfully it all worked out. And I'm just going to put the stars in the vase filler in the lantern just to kind of fill it up. I didn't want to do a candle. I just wanted to do something kind of different. And I thought this was really cute. And I here am just displaying it on top of the riser. And I love all of the fun little patriotic things. If you like this video, once again, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know what your favorite DIY was down in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new, because a lot of my viewers are not subscribed, so please subscribe. That would be great. We're going to start with a couple of books, well, 3 to be exact. I did pick these up from the Dollar Tree. If this is hard for you to see or do, then look away. You can also use some from the thrift store. I've done book stacks that you do not tear the books at all. But, you know, if they're at the Dollar Tree and they don't sell there, a lot of these just end up in the landfill. So I'm giving it new life. So we're going to pull off the cover and back and the cover on the spine as much as I can, and you'll see how we finish taking care of that. Now, I've made book stacks before, but here you can see it. We're doing it with some sandpaper. My sanding block had some paint on it, so I just wrapped a fresh piece of sandpaper around it, and we just gently sanded off the spine and just smooth that out. So we're going to glue these. I was showing you how some of them do not have a blank page. I found that there's more blank pages in the back of the book than the front of the book when you tear off the cover. And so I was just arranging them so that there would be no words shown when we were done. So I'm just using some hot glue to attach these all together. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and put some Mod Podge on the top of this book on the paper. It will wrinkle just a little bit, but that's okay. We're going to come back to it and fix that up. Just make sure you get it all the way to the edges. You want to put a good coat, but don't drench it because the papers are thin and you could tear it. Just make sure you get all of the edges. And then once that dries, we will come back to it. So if you haven't done Mod Podge this way, this is a great way to avoid getting wrinkles. So the Mod Podge is now dry, and we're going to just cut out some paper. I picked this up at Hobby Lobby. So we're lining that up. I'm trying really hard to keep it in place because I wanted the pattern to be like, straight up and down. And then we're putting a piece of parchment paper and an iron. You can use a heat press if you have that from like a Cricut or whatever. I just use my iron and make sure there's no steam. And that reactivates the Mod Podge, and we get a really nice smooth finish here. And then I let that cool because the paper was obviously a little bit soft and curling up a little bit initially when it was still warm. Once it was fully dry and the Mod Podge was back to being dried down, I just used my sanding block, and did a gentle away motion to get off the excess paper. And then I'm using these transfers from Dollar Tree. I was deciding between the red, white, and blue and the Star Spangled Banner. I went with Star Spangled Banner. I've gone back and forth on how I feel about these rub-on transfers. I think my last video I was like, oh, I really like these. And then I had trouble with them today. But I made them work. You're just going to scrape them on. These are more of a foil. I don't know if you can see here, the S did not fully transfer and it was like smeared. So I couldn't add it. Anyways, I decided to continue on. I ended up piecing together another just piece from the transfer and filled in the S. I'll show you in a minute. But now I'm going in. I have a mixture of a couple of gray paints. You'll see this. I used it in another DIY, and I'm just dry brushing over this. I started on the pages just to see. I don't know. I wanted to make sure I didn't have too much paint on. You can see one side of the pages had some paint splatter because I left this in my work area while I was doing other stuff and I got paint on it. So I did kind of add on some pieces to the S and smooth that out. And I'm just dry brushing this. I wanted to dull down the gold and just kind of, make it a little bit more rustic. The paper itself was pretty rustic looking. And now I'm just Mod Podging over this. I wanted to seal in the transfers, which isn't always necessary, but these gold foil ones just felt like they needed a seal on them. And then I'm sealing the top too, which normally I do with Mod Podge. I really don't think it was necessary here, but I did it. And then I just took some twine, wrapped it around a couple of times, tied it in a knot, added on a bow, and yeah, that is it for the book stack, and I really do like how this came out. I um, I feel like I was able to dull down the gold a little bit, so it still looked rustic, even though it was metallic gold. Anyways, I love this book stack here. For our next one, I'm taking a sign from Hobby Lobby. This sign I'm showing you is I picked up for 99 cents on clearance. So I love to find things on Hobby Lobby clearance that I can do things with. And I wanted to try to pull off this paper. Sometimes I just paint over items. Sometimes I try to take it all off. This is what I did this go around. So I realized that the top layer, I wasn't going to get it all, just peeling it off. So I took a damp paper towel, let it sit, came back to it, and this just softened up the glue. Now this white part here, this was scraping off pretty easy because this was just the under layer. So I left the paper or the wet paper towel on for another couple of rounds, just dampened it and let it sit on the top layer. And then once the top layer came off, I did it again on the bottom layer. And I ended up getting a lot of this off. I'm just using a scraping tool. I don't know, you can decide if this is a worthwhile step for you. I did not get the whole thing totally cleared off. I'm guessing maybe I could have if I had continued going with this process. But I ended up going in with some sandpaper and finishing off to what I thought was good enough in the end. I don't know. It ended up working out great in the end. So you can make your call how you want to handle it. So you can still see there's a good amount there, but it was very, very smooth, so I didn't think I'd have any problems. I did kind of have some problems, but it all ended up getting covered up. So do with that information what you will. We're going to give this 2 coats of Waverly chalk paint in the color white. I am going to do the top and the sides. I don't know if the sides had a paper on it. If it did, I did not take that off. So it all worked out in the end. That's just kind of how I go with my DIYs. If you can see there, you can see like the paint cracked, and I'm guessing it's from what was underneath, but everything felt smooth, so I just continued on. So I mixed up poured out some of those elephant and silver lining paint is the colors I have from Waverly. And I just was showing you because the background, we're using window clings, and the background had a color and texture to it, and I really wanted it to blend in. So I started out very minimal with the silver lining, pulling out, I think, a hair from my chippy brush, and I went light and then I layered. I ended up going pretty dark and pretty heavy, but I just wasn't sure. So I just kind of wanted to do a little bit at a time, and if I got it too dark in a spot, I went back with the light paint, and I just kind of kept going back and forth until I had what I liked. You could just do a solid color too if you don't care about the edges of the window cling. I don't think it would look horrible, but I don't know. This is just kind of what I went with. Plus the colors of the window cling were more muted, so I was going for a little bit of a darker look. And you see I mixed some Waverly chalk paint in the color Ocean with some burnt umber because, again, I was going for a little bit more muted rustic color to match the window clings, and I taped off the front, and I decided I wanted to paint all of the edges with the blue. And when that dried, I took the stencil, which is from Hobby Lobby, and we're going to stencil on some white stars. I decided that it would go best if I didn't try to do like a straight line across. I thought I might struggle with that. So I just did the smaller stars, and I did random patterns all the way across, and I did this on all 4 of the sides, and I thought it added a nice added touch around, just around the perimeter. You'll see that in the end. And now I'm using some Mod Podge to put our window clings. We're going to do this big truck window cling, and then I add on a few other pieces from it, some smaller pieces. And I'm just doing a thin layer of Mod Podge on the back. Portions of this I do it on the piece itself. And then I just slowly, like, you have a little bit of wiggle room time here. I'm sliding it down, but you want to push out all of the air bubbles and then let it get tacky and a little bit dry before you Mod Podge over top. Otherwise, the window cling just continues to move around. Here, I tried doing it more on the back, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to put it on the sign itself. And I just worked my way across, and then here I am adding on a couple little rockets and a couple stars. I just let my hands get messy and did it this way. And then once that's all done and everything's kind of set in place, I do Mod Podge over the whole thing. That helps hold it down, but it also helps kind of make the different textures blend in and hopefully not look like a window cling by going over the whole thing. I'm using Mod Podge in the matte finish. I'm sorry guys, I don't feel 100%. I guess this is like a summer cold or something. I don't know. I did Mod Podge the edges too, just so that the paint wouldn't chip off when I was sitting on a shelf or something. But I really love how this came out. I thought it was really cute. It's like I said, it's a little bit darker, not as bright of a colors, but I was trying to match the tone of the window clings, and I love the little star perimeter. So love that one as well. All right, I'm breaking out my miter box and I got this for Christmas and I hadn't used it yet, and I'm finally using it. I was kind of intimidated. I didn't need to be. I'm showing you how the edge had a little bit of a lip that helps hold it still on a table. Here I'm showing you this in real time. It didn't take long, but I was kind of getting a feel for it, and we're going to cut down a dowel rod into 3 different sizes. I didn't measure them, I just made sure that they were different sizes, but that didn't take too long. That was like real time there. Still kind of getting used to getting my saw in and out of it, but you can see I got a pretty clean cut. We did smooth this out with our sandpaper, and my first cut was definitely the roughest, but used my sanding block once again to just smooth out those edges. And then this is the ocean with the burnt umber. We're going to use that blue throughout, and I'm just going to paint the dowel rods in different colors. We're making little tiny like firecrackers. And I'm going to use crimson. I could have dulled this one down with some brown paint too. That might have been a good idea, but I go over it and kind of dry brush at the end anyway. And I use my heat gun just to dry it so that I can use the, hold the other end and do the other side. But I'm going to do red, white, and blue. I don't show you the white because you guys know how to paint. So, but I did want to show you, that's how I did it. If you don't have a heat gun or a hair dryer, just set it down and when it dries, come back to it. But I was using my heat gun. On the white one, I took this little firecracker, firework, rocket, I don't know, off of the gold transfers and applied that one. And I thought that was a kind of a nice little addition. And we're going to Mod Podge all of these once again, just to kind of seal the paint in so that it doesn't, chip off when you're doing stuff with it. I don't know. And now I'm using my chippy brush and some burnt umber. I got a little heavy on the red heavier than I planned to, but I just kind of smeared it with my hands. And, sometimes I do this a little bit more proper, and sometimes you just kind of go with it. Did that on all of them. And now, so I wanted to poke a hole in. I don't have a little hand drill. So here's a way to do it without power tools. I'm just using my tiny scissors, and I'm poking a hole in. I don't need it super deep. And when I opened, I was going to use some jute twine that's wired, but I had this, I think it's called berry garland from Dollar Tree, and I was like, oh, that would kind of work good. Like I took off the berries, but anyways, it was unraveling a little bit, so I used some hot glue and just used my finger protectors to kind of smooth that down. And we're going to make this our little, is it called the wick? I don't know what it's called on the firecracker, but we're going to use this. So put a little dab of hot glue in the hole and kind of wedge that in there. And it's got the wire, so it's going to keep the shape. And I just kind of twisted it and bent it. And then at this point, I cleaned up all my paintbrushes, but I had a little bit of paint still sitting there. So I used a paper towel and just brushed on the burnt umber on the wick just to kind of cover up any of the hot glue and just, I don't know, make it look better to me. And then I hot glued the 3 together and took a little bit of twine wrapping around it. And I think this is really cute. I've seen an idea out there somewhere and I'd been wanting to make this, but I was intimidated to use my saw. I'm glad I used it. It wasn't difficult at all. And this is going to be a really cute addition to my tiered tray. I've seen these little things made all sorts of shapes and sizes, but I thought using the dowel rod was a nice way to make a mini one for the tiered tray. Next up, I have this palette sign. So this is just one of those palettes from the Dollar Tree. I've already taped it off. We're going to make a simple flag. This is not complicated, but I'm going to use crimson for our red stripes, and then we will paint the other ones just with some white. My head keeps getting in the way, which causes it to come out of focus. I took a wood star from this was a Hobby Lobby pack for painting that white as well. Let me know down in the comments if you decorate for 4th of July, or I like to do my patriotic stuff through all of summer, but I'm just curious, or do you not decorate with any red, white, and blue at all? Okay, so now I'm going in with more of that blue paint mixture that I made, and we're going to paint the top part here. And then I wanted to sand it down, and it was dry at this point, but I somehow got like a white scuff on the blue. But we're going to rough it up a little bit with our sandpaper, and then I did just put on some more blue paint. You can see it's kind of wet there, just touching that spot up. And we're going to go in with the chippy brush with a little bit of that burnt umber. I didn't want the stark brightness. I wanted all of my DIYs to kind of go together so I could feel free to use them together if I needed to. And then I was like, okay, I need to speed up drying that little spot so I could add some more of the brown paint. And then we're just hot gluing our star on here. And that is all for this DIY. Very simple. Once again, would be great in a tier tray, but would also be kind of great in a little collection, in a little display. Those are the words I'm looking for. And that's going to do it for today's video. If you liked it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new. I'd love to have you be a part of my little YouTube family. And I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.